You cannot quite say when the world became too fast to recognize you. It was not dramatic. There was no ceremony. You simply woke up one day and realized that the people around you no longer paused long enough to see you fully. Not in the way that mattered. Not in the way that once turned an ordinary Tuesday into a moment that anchored you to the earth. You pass people constantly now, in hallways that smell of recycled air, on sidewalks crowded with strangers whose faces blur into a single, rushing stream. You exchange words that tick all the necessary boxes: polite, efficient, appropriate. But something underneath those words has vanished. The conversations you have now are smooth and frictionless, engineered to waste no one's time. And in their efficiency, they have lost the texture that once made you feel like a person who mattered simply by being present. You remember, though you cannot say exactly when, a different kind of exchange. It happened on a doorstep, or maybe it was beside a fence. The geography matters less than the quality of the moment itself. Someone stopped, not because they had to, not because a task required it. They stopped because you were there, and your presence was enough of a reason. They leaned against the fence, or they sat on the step, and they asked you something that was not a question designed to gather information. They asked in a way that meant they were willing to stay for the answer. However long it took, however far it wandered. You felt, in that moment, like you were being read carefully. Like the other person was taking the time to notice not just what you said, but how you said it. The pauses, the hesitations, the way your voice shifted when you landed on something true. This was not love necessarily. It was not romance or even deep friendship, though it could have been those things too. It was something both smaller and larger. It was recognition. The simple, profound act of being seen by another human being who was not in a hurry to be somewhere else, who was not half listening while scanning a screen, who was not waiting for their turn to speak. They were there with you, and you were there with them, and the world, for that small pocket of time, contracted into a space that held just the two of you and the words passing between you like objects you could almost touch. You cannot buy that now. You cannot schedule it. You cannot optimize it or make it happen on demand. You have tried in your own way. You have joined groups and attended events and put yourself in rooms with people who share your interests. You have swiped and matched and agreed to meet in cafes that serve coffee in cups that all look the same. And sometimes the conversations are pleasant. Sometimes they are even interesting. But they do not have that weight. They do not press against you in the way that tells you that you have been truly noticed. You leave those conversations and you cannot remember an hour later what you actually said. Not because it was unmemorable, but because you were not fully there. Neither of you were. You were both performing a version of connection that resembled the real thing but lacked its substance. The modern world has given you many tools for staying in touch. You can send a message across an ocean in less than a second. You can see the faces of people you have not visited in years. You can broadcast your thoughts to hundreds or thousands and receive instant feedback in the form of hearts and thumbs and short affirming phrases. But none of this replaces the feeling of being recognized in the flesh, of standing in front of another person who has nowhere else to be and who is choosing, in that moment, to let you matter. The digital versions of recognition are thin. They are shadows of the thing itself. They give you a hit of something that feels like being seen, but the high fades quickly, and you find yourself reaching for it again and again, never quite satisfied, never quite full. You wonder sometimes if you have become ungrateful. After all, you live in an age of extraordinary convenience. You have access to information that previous generations could not have imagined. You can learn almost anything, go almost anywhere, connect with almost anyone. And yet you feel a kind of loneliness that is hard to name. It is not the loneliness of isolation. You are rarely alone in the physical sense. You are surrounded by people. You interact with them daily, but you are lonely in the way that comes from being unseen. from moving through a world that is too busy to notice you, from living in a time when everyone is racing towards something and no one has time to stop and lean against a fence and ask you how you are, in a way that means they actually want to know. This is not anyone's fault. You do not blame the people around you. They are not cruel or indifferent. They are simply moving at the same speed you are. They are responding to the same pressures. They have the same long lists of things that need doing, the same sense that if they stop moving, they will fall behind, the same quiet fear that there is never enough time. You see it in their faces when you pass them. The tight focus, the hurried distraction, the look of people who are always mentally 2 steps ahead of where their bodies are. You recognize it because you wear the same expression. You have become a person who is always halfway somewhere else, and so has everyone around you. And so the moments of true recognition, the moments when 2 people stop and are fully present to each other, have become rare to the point of feeling almost mythical. Yet you think back to the doorsteps and fences of your childhood, though you know this is a trick of memory. You know that your childhood was not a golden age. You know that people then also had their distractions and their burdens. But something about the rhythm of life was different. People lingered more, not because they had more time, but because the culture of speed had not yet fully colonized the hours. There were fewer ways to be elsewhere while being present, fewer screens to pull your attention away, fewer notifications to interrupt the flow of a conversation. When someone stopped to talk to you, they were stopped, fully, and you were stopped too. And in that mutual stopping, something happened that you did not appreciate at the time because you assumed it would always be available. You assumed that you would always have access to those moments of recognition, that they were a permanent feature of the landscape of being human. You did not know that you were living through the end of an era, that the world was shifting beneath your feet in ways you could not yet perceive, that the doorstep conversations and fence-leaning chats were already beginning to disappear, not because people no longer cared about each other, but because the infrastructure of daily life was being redesigned around principles that had no room for the slow, unscheduled, unprofitable act of simply being present to another person. Now you live in a world that measures everything in terms of efficiency. How quickly can you get from point A to point B? How much can you accomplish in a single day? Now, how many connections can you maintain with the least amount of effort? The world rewards you for moving fast and punishes you for lingering. It tells you that time spent just talking, just standing still, just being with another person without a clear agenda is time wasted. And so you have learned to keep moving. You have learned to multitask and optimize and make every moment count. And in doing so, you have lost the thing that once made you feel like you were not alone in the universe. You are not alone in this loss. Everyone around you is experiencing it too, whether they can name it or not. You see it in the way people apologize for taking up your time, in the way they preface their stories with disclaimers about not boring you, in the way they wrap up conversations before they have really begun, as if they are afraid of imposing, so as if being present to another person is a burden rather than a gift. You see it in the way friendships now require scheduling weeks in advance, and even then, half the time someone cancels because something came up. You see it in the way people say they miss you, but never quite find the time to see you. You see it in your own behavior, in the way you have become someone who is always mentally calculating whether a conversation is worth the time it takes, whether the connection is valuable enough to justify the investment. This is what the modern world has done to recognition. It has turned it into a transaction. You no longer simply see each other, you evaluate each other, you measure the return on investment. You decide whether someone is worth your attention based on what they can offer you, and you assume they are doing the same to you. And so every interaction becomes a kind of performance, a demonstration of value, an attempt to prove that you are worth the other person's time. The ease has gone out of it. The simple pleasure of being with another person, with no agenda, with no goal beyond the mutual recognition of each other's existence, has become almost impossible to access. You wonder if this is what loneliness really is. Not the absence of people, but the absence of recognition. The feeling of moving through a world where no one has time to see you, where everyone is too busy, too distracted, too overwhelmed by their own lives to stop and notice that you are there. You wonder if this is why so many people now feel untethered, adrift, lost, not because they lack connections, but because the connections they have are too thin to hold them, too transactional to matter, too efficient to carry the weight of a human life. And so you find yourself thinking about those doorsteps and fences, those moments when someone stopped without hurry, when you felt seen in a way that required nothing of you except your presence, when you could lean against a wooden post that had been warmed by the sun and talk about nothing in particular and everything that mattered, and know that the other person was there with you, fully, without one eye on the clock or one hand on their phone. You think about those moments not because they were perfect, but because they gave you something you did not know you would lose. They gave you a place in the world, a sense that you mattered not because of what you could do or achieve or provide, but simply because you existed, and your existence was worth noticing. This is the ache that sits in your chest when you pass someone on the street and they do not meet your eyes. When you have a conversation that ticks all the boxes of politeness but leaves you feeling emptier than before. When you scroll through images of other people's lives and feel simultaneously connected and completely alone. You are not nostalgic for the past because it was better. You are nostalgic for a way of being with other people that once felt natural and now feels almost impossible. You are nostalgic for a world that had room in it for the slow, unscheduled, unprofitable act of recognition. And you wonder, late at night when you cannot sleep, whether you will ever feel that way again. Whether you will ever again experience the simple profundity of being seen by another person who has nowhere else to be. Whether the world will ever slow down enough for those moments to return. Or whether you are living in the long aftermath of something that has already ended, something that you did not know to mourn until it was gone. But before you sink too deeply into that mourning, before you let the ache harden into bitterness, it might help to understand where this hunger for recognition comes from, why it matters so much, why the absence of it feels not just disappointing, but destabilizing. To understand that, you have to go back. Not to your own childhood, but further. Back to a time when humans did not yet have the option of moving too fast to see each other. Back to when recognition was not a luxury, but a necessity woven into the fabric of survival itself. Imagine for a moment a version of human life that existed for most of our species' history. You are living in a small group, maybe 30 people, maybe 50. These are not strangers. You have known most of them since birth. You know their faces as well as you know your own hands. You know how they move, how they speak, what makes them laugh, what frightens them. You know because your survival has always depended on knowing. In a world without institutions, without laws enforced by distant strangers, without the safety net of modern infrastructure, your life is held in place by the people around you. You do not have the option of being anonymous. There is no crowd to disappear into, no city where you can reinvent yourself among strangers. Everyone knows who you are. They know your strengths and your weaknesses. They know what you contribute and what you fail at. They know your history because they were there for it, and you know theirs. This is not always comfortable. It means you cannot escape your mistakes, cannot hide your failures, cannot pretend to be someone you are not. But it also means you are seen, constantly, inescapably. Your existence is not something you have to prove or perform. It is simply a fact that everyone around you is aware of. In this world, recognition is not a rare gift. It is the default state of being. You cannot walk from one end of the camp to the other without being noticed, without someone calling out to you, without someone asking where you are going or what you are doing or whether you need help. This can be intrusive. It can feel suffocating. But it also means you are never in doubt about whether you matter. Your place in the group is clear. You are embedded in a web of relationships that hold you even when you are not thinking about them. The doorsteps and fences of this older world are everywhere. Not because there are literal doorsteps, but because every interaction has the quality you remember from those childhood moments. People stop when they see you. Not because they have scheduled time for it, but because stopping is what you do when you encounter another person. There is no other option, no way to wave and keep moving, no device to check that gives you an excuse to avoid engagement. When you meet someone, you meet them, fully, and they meet you. This does not mean every conversation is deep. Many are routine, practical, about food or weather or the tasks of the day. But even the routine conversations carry the weight of recognition. They are part of the ongoing process of seeing and being seen that knits the group together. You are constantly reminding each other that you exist, that you matter, that your presence is noted and valued. This happens so automatically, so continuously, that you do not think about it. It is like breathing, like the ground beneath your feet. It is simply the texture of being alive among other people. And here is the crucial part. This recognition is not just social. It is not just about feeling good or being liked. It is about survival. In a world without grocery stores or hospitals or emergency services, you depend on these people in ways that are hard for a modern mind to grasp. If you are injured, they are the ones who will care for you. If you are sick, they will bring you food and water. If you are threatened, they will defend you, and you do the same for them. Your life and their lives are interwoven in ways that make independence not just difficult, but impossible. This means that being recognized is not a pleasant extra. It is a necessity. If the group does not see you, if they do not notice when you are struggling or suffering or in need, you could die. Not metaphorically, literally. Your survival depends on being embedded in this web of mutual recognition and care. And so, evolution has wired you to crave it, to feel deep satisfaction when you are seen and deep distress when you are not. Your nervous system is calibrated to relax in the presence of people who know you and to activate in the presence of strangers or in situations where you are isolated. This is why the doorstep moments matter so much. They are not trivial. They are not just nice. They are the external expression of something your body and brain recognize as essential to your survival. When someone stops and leans against a fence and gives you their full attention, your nervous system registers safety. It registers belonging. It registers the presence of the social bonds that once meant the difference between life and death. And even though you now live in a world where your physical survival does not depend on those bonds in the same way, your body does not know that. It still responds to recognition as if it is a matter of life and death. Because for most of human history, it was. So when you feel that ache for the moments when you were truly seen, you are not being nostalgic for something trivial. You are responding to a deep evolutionary need, a need that shaped your species over hundreds of thousands of years, a need that does not go away just because the world has changed. Your body still craves the same things it always has. The same sense of being known and held by a group of people who care whether you live or die. The same rhythm of daily recognition that tells you that you are not alone in the world. But here is the contradiction. The same forces that once made recognition automatic have also made it, at times, oppressive. Because in those small groups, you could not escape being seen. You could not have privacy, could not have secrets, or could not reinvent yourself or walk away from your past. If you made a mistake, everyone knew. If you were different, everyone noticed. If you wanted to be alone, that was often not an option. The web of recognition that held you also constrained you. It gave you a place in the world, but it also locked you into that place in ways that could be suffocating. And so, when the modern world emerged and offered you the possibility of anonymity, of moving to a place where no one knew you, of reinventing yourself among strangers, many people leaped at the chance. Not because they did not value recognition, but because they also valued freedom. The freedom to be someone new, to escape the weight of everyone's expectations, to make mistakes without the whole community knowing, to be seen on your own terms rather than on terms that had been set for you before you were born. This is the bargain you have made, often without realizing it. You have traded the constant, automatic recognition of a small, stable community for the freedom and opportunity of a large, anonymous society. And in many ways, it is a good trade. You have freedoms that your ancestors could not have imagined. You can choose your work, your home, your relationships. You can walk away from situations that do not serve you. You can become whoever you want to be, or at least try. But you have also lost something in the exchange. You have lost the automatic, effortless sense of being held by a community that knows you. And that loss is real. It is not something you can simply think your way out of or dismiss as irrational nostalgia. Your body does not care about the logic of the trade-off. It does not understand why you have chosen freedom over recognition. It only knows that it is not getting the social input it was designed to expect. And so, it sends you signals. Loneliness, anxiety, a vague sense of unease that follows you even in crowded rooms. A hunger for something you cannot quite name. These are not signs that you are broken. They are signs that you are human, that you are carrying needs that evolved over millennia and that do not disappear just because the world has changed. And so you find yourself caught between two worlds. You do not want to go back to the small, claustrophobic communities of the past. You value your freedom, your privacy, your ability to choose your own path. But you also ache for the recognition that those communities provided, and for the sense of being known and held. For the doorstep conversations that made you feel like you mattered. You want both, freedom and belonging, autonomy and recognition. But the world you live in makes it very hard to have both at the same time. This is the tension that sits at the heart of modern life. You are living in a social structure that your nervous system was not designed for. A structure that gives you many things your ancestors never had, but also withholds things they took for granted. And you are trying to navigate this mismatch with tools that were never meant for the task. You are trying to meet your need for recognition in a world that is organized around efficiency and speed and individualism. And it is not working. Not quite. Not in the way that would let you rest easy. So what do you do with this understanding? You cannot go back. You cannot recreate the conditions of ancestral life. You cannot force the world to slow down or the people around you to stop and see you the way you long to be seen. But you can stop blaming yourself for the ache. You can stop thinking that your need for recognition is a weakness or a failure. You can understand it for what it is, a deep, old, legitimate need. A need that is not going away. A need that deserves to be acknowledged and, where possible, met. And you can start looking for the doorsteps that still exist. Because they do exist, even if they are harder to find. Even if they require more intention. Even if the world is not designed to make them easy. There are still people who will stop when they see you. Who will lean against the metaphorical fence and give you their full attention. Who will ask how you are in a way that means they actually want to know. They are rarer now. You have to seek them out. You have to create the conditions that allow those moments to happen. But they are there. And when you find them, when you let yourself be seen and you see the other person in return, something in you settles. Something old and deep recognizes that you are not as alone as you feared. This is not about recreating the past. It is about understanding what the past gave you so that you can find ways to meet the same needs in the present. It is about recognizing that your hunger for being seen is not nostalgia for a time that never really existed. It is a signal from the deepest parts of yourself, telling you what you need to be fully human. And it is about learning to listen to that signal without shame, without judgment, and without the modern insistence that you should be able to thrive in isolation as long as you are sufficiently optimized. You are not meant to thrive in isolation. You never were. And the doorsteps and fences are not relics of a lost world. They are reminders of what you still need, what you have always needed, what you will always need. The question is not whether you need recognition. The question is how you will find it in a world that has forgotten how to provide it, and whether you are willing to slow down long enough to let it happen. But even as you begin to understand this need, even as you start to name the ache for what it is, there is a deeper layer to explore, because the doorstep moments, the fence-leaning conversations, were not just about being seen by any person. They were about being seen in a particular way, and in a context that gave the recognition weight and meaning. It was not just that someone noticed you. It was that they noticed you in a place that mattered, a place that was yours, a place that held your history and your belonging. The doorstep was not just a physical location. It was a marker of your relationship to the world around you. It said, "This is my home. This is where I live. This is the threshold between my private life and the community beyond." When someone stopped at your doorstep, they were acknowledging that boundary. They were respecting it. They were saying, "I see you here, in this place that is yours, and I am asking permission to enter, even if only in conversation." The doorstep conversation was a ritual of mutual recognition that went beyond the individuals involved. It was about recognizing each other's place in the larger landscape of shared life. And the fence. The fence was a different kind of boundary, not the threshold of the home, but the edge of the yard, the garden, the property. The fence was where private space met public space, where your world touched your neighbor's world. When you leaned against a fence and talked to the person on the other side, you were enacting a kind of intimacy that respected distance. You were close enough to talk easily, but separated by this structure that reminded you both that you were separate people with separate lives. The fence made the conversation possible precisely because it maintained a boundary. It allowed you to be present to each other without collapsing into each other. These physical structures, the doorsteps and fences, were part of a larger geography of belonging, a geography that is hard to find in the modern world, because the modern world is organized around mobility and flexibility and the idea that you can be anywhere, do anything, connect with anyone. Which sounds like freedom, and in many ways it is. But it also means you have no fixed place, no doorstep that is truly yours, no fence that marks the boundary of your world. You live in spaces that are temporary, apartments you rent, houses you might sell, neighborhoods you might leave. Your relationship to place is contingent, always provisional, always open to revision. And this contingency changes the nature of recognition. Because when someone sees you in a place that might not be yours in a year or 5 years, when they see you in a context that you yourself do not fully belong to, the recognition is thinner. It is less rooted. It does not have the weight of history and permanence that once made those doorstep conversations feel like they were stitching you into the fabric of the world. You are seen, perhaps, but you are seen as a temporary presence, a person passing through, not someone who is woven into the place itself. Think about the neighborhoods your grandparents or great-grandparents lived in, if they were fortunate enough to have that stability. Streets where people lived for decades, where children grew up and had children of their own, and sometimes stayed in the same house or the same block, where the physical landscape accumulated layers of memory and meaning, where the doorstep was not just a piece of concrete, but a place where countless conversations had happened, where generations had said hello and goodbye, where the boundary between private and public had been negotiated and renegotiated over years. In that kind of place, Recognition had a depth that is hard to replicate in a world of constant movement. When someone stopped at your doorstep, they were not just seeing you in that moment. They were seeing you against the backdrop of all the other moments that had happened there. They remembered when you were younger, when your parents were alive, when the tree in your yard was just a sapling. The recognition was layered with time. It carried the weight of continuity. It said, "You have been here and I have been here, and we have both been part of this place long enough that our presence has become part of what the place means." You do not have that now, most likely. You live in a world where people move for work, for relationships, for opportunity, for change, where staying in one place for your whole life is rare and often seen as a failure of ambition, where the ideal is to be mobile, adaptable, ready to go wherever the next opportunity takes you. And so the doorsteps you lean against are not really yours. The fences you chat beside do not mark the edge of a world you have inhabited long enough to call it home. You are always a little bit provisional, always a little bit temporary, always aware that this might not be where you end up. And the people around you are the same. They are also temporary, also provisional, also likely to move on when the lease is up or the job changes or the relationship ends. So even when you do have those moments of recognition, even when someone stops and sees you, there is a fragility to it, a sense that this connection, like everything else, is temporary, that it might not survive the next move, the next change, the next shift in the landscape of your lives. This is not anyone's fault. It is simply the structure of modern life. The economy demands mobility. Relationships demand flexibility. The pursuit of self-actualization demands the freedom to change your circumstances when they no longer serve you. And so you move, and so does everyone else. And the geography of belonging, the doorsteps and fences that once anchored people to place and to each other, becomes a landscape of temporary markers, places you pass through rather than places you inhabit. But your body does not understand temporary. Your nervous system is not wired for provisional belonging. It is wired for the deep, slow, accumulated sense of being rooted in a place and a community. It wants to know that the people who see you today will still be there to see you tomorrow, and next year, and in a decade. It wants to know that the place where you are recognized is a place you will continue to inhabit. That the recognition is not just a momentary acknowledgement, but part of an ongoing story that has a past and a future. When that continuity is missing, when recognition happens in a context that is temporary and contingent, it does not satisfy the need in the same way. It is like eating food that looks right, but lacks the nutrients your body requires. It gives you a momentary sense of fullness, but the hunger returns quickly. You find yourself constantly seeking recognition, constantly trying to recreate those doorstep moments, but never quite feeling satisfied because the recognition is happening in a context that lacks the depth and permanence your nervous system is looking for. This is part of why social media feels so hollow. It offers recognition of sorts. People see you. They respond to you. They acknowledge your presence. But it all happens in a context that has no geography, no permanence, no physical rootedness. The recognition is disembodied. It does not happen at a doorstep or beside a fence. It does not happen in a place that you inhabit and that holds your history. It happens in a space that is everywhere and nowhere. A space that you can access from anywhere, but that belongs to no one. And so the recognition, even when it comes, does not land in the same way. It does not settle into your body as proof that you have a place in the world. Your ancestors knew where they belonged because they were surrounded by physical markers of belonging. The house they lived in, the land they worked, the paths they walked, the doorsteps they paused at, the fences they leaned against. These were not abstract concepts. They were tangible realities that anchored identity to place. When you were recognized in that context, the recognition was also an acknowledgement of your relationship to place. It said, "I see you here, in this place that we share, and your presence here matters." You do not have that now, or you have it only in fragments. You have favorite coffee shops that might close, apartments that you rent, neighborhoods that you might leave. The places you inhabit do not fully belong to you, and you do not fully belong to them. And so, when someone recognizes you, it is a recognition without roots. It is a recognition that floats free of any stable geography. It feels good in the moment, but it does not give you the deep, settled sense of having a place in the world. And yet, there is something important to understand here. The past was not paradise. The doorsteps and fences were real, but so was the suffocating closeness of communities where everyone knew your business, where you could not escape your family's reputation or your own mistakes, where the recognition that held you in place also trapped you, where the geography of belonging was also a geography of constraint. You belonged, yes, you had a place, but that place was not always one you chose. It was often assigned to you by birth, by family, by the accidents of where and to whom you were born. The woman who longed to leave her small town, but could not because everyone knew her and expected her to stay. The man who wanted to pursue a dream, but was bound by the family business, by the land that had been passed down for generations. The child who did not fit the mold of the community and spent their whole life feeling like a stranger in the only place they were allowed to call home. These are also stories of the past, stories of the cost of belonging, stories of what you had to give up in order to have a place in the world. So when you feel nostalgia for the doorsteps and fences, it is important to remember that you are not nostalgic for the whole reality. You are nostalgic for the part that gave you something you are missing now. The recognition, the rootedness, the sense of being held in place by a community and a geography that knew you. But you are not nostalgic for the parts that constrained you, for the lack of choice, for the inability to leave or reinvent yourself or pursue a life that was different from what your community expected. This is the paradox of nostalgia. It is not a longing for the past as it actually was. It is a longing for the parts of the past that met needs the present is not meeting. And those needs are real. They are legitimate. But they do not require you to go back. They do not require you to recreate the conditions that gave rise to them. They require you to understand what those conditions provided and to find new ways, in the context of the present, to meet the same needs. You need recognition. You need to be seen. You need to feel like you have a place in the world. But you do not need to sacrifice your freedom to get those things. You do not need to trap yourself in a small, unchanging community. You do not need to give up your ability to move and change and grow. You need to find a way to create the conditions for recognition within the framework of the freedom you value. And that is harder, much harder, because the old ways were not chosen. They were simply the structure of life. The new ways have to be intentional. They have to be built, consciously and deliberately, in a world that is not designed to support them. So you look for the doorsteps that still exist. Not literal doorsteps necessarily, though sometimes, yes, literal doorsteps, but doorsteps in the metaphorical sense. Thresholds between your inner life and the world outside. Places where you can be met by another person who stops, who pauses, who gives you their full attention. You look for the fences, the boundaries that allow intimacy without intrusion, the structures that let you be close to another person while still maintaining your separateness. You find these in friendships that have lasted long enough to accumulate history, in communities that you have chosen and that have chosen you back, in rituals of connection that you create deliberately because the world will not create them for you, in practices of showing up, of being present, of stopping even when everything in you wants to keep moving. You find them in the decision to stay in a place long enough for it to become yours, to let roots grow, to build relationships that are not contingent on the next job or the next opportunity, to invest in a geography of belonging even though the world tells you that staying in one place is a limitation rather than a gift. This is not easy. It requires you to go against the grain of modern life, to choose depth over breadth, stability over mobility, rootedness over flexibility. And those choices come with costs. You might miss opportunities. You might feel left behind as others move on to new places and new experiences. You might sometimes feel trapped by the very commitments that give you a sense of belonging. But you might also find that the doorstep moments start to return, that the fence-leaning conversations become possible again, that the recognition you are hungry for becomes available in a way it has not been since you were young. Or you might find a different path, one that accepts the transience of modern life and looks for recognition in forms that are not tied to place, in communities that exist online or across distances, in friendships that are maintained through screens and messages and the occasional visit, in a sense of belonging that is not geographic but relational, built on shared values or interests or experiences rather than shared space. This path has its own gifts and its own limitations. It can provide real connection, real recognition, but it is unlikely to satisfy the part of you that longs for the physical rootedness of the doorstep and the fence. There is no perfect solution, no way to have everything, no way to fully reconcile the needs that evolved in one kind of world with the realities of living in a very different kind of world. You are caught in the middle, and so is everyone around you. You are all trying to meet old needs with new tools, and sometimes it works and sometimes it does not, and mostly you muddle through, alternating between moments of genuine connection and long stretches of loneliness that you cannot quite name. But understanding the nature of the longing helps. Understanding that it is not weakness or nostalgia or a failure to adapt. Understanding that it is a signal from the deepest parts of yourself, telling you what you need to be whole. Understanding that the doorsteps and fences were not trivial. They were part of a system of recognition that said, you have a place here, and you are seen, and you matter. Understanding that you are allowed to grieve the loss of that system, even as you appreciate the freedoms you have gained. An understanding that you can look for new doorsteps and new fences without having to go back to a past that no longer exists, and that was never as simple as memory makes it seem. And maybe, in the understanding, there is a kind of peace. Not the peace of resolution, but the peace of clarity. The peace of knowing what you are dealing with. The peace of naming the hunger so that you can start to think about how to feed it, not perfectly, but well enough. Well enough to keep going. Well enough to build a life that has room in it for the slow, unhurried moments when you are truly seen. Well enough to find, here and there, the kind of recognition that makes you feel like you are not alone in the universe. You are living in a time between worlds. The old world, where recognition was automatic and place was permanent, is gone. The new world, where recognition is scarce and place is provisional, is not yet fully formed. You are in the transition, and transitions are hard. They are uncomfortable. They require you to live with uncertainty and ambiguity, and the lack of clear answers. But they are also generative. They are spaces where new possibilities emerge, where you get to ask questions that previous generations did not have to ask because the answers were given to them by the structure of their lives. What does recognition look like in a world of mobility and anonymity? How do you create a sense of place when you might not stay in one place for long? How do you build relationships that have depth and continuity when everyone around you is also on the move? These are not easy questions, but they are your questions, the questions of your time. And in asking them, in struggling with them, in trying to find answers that work for you, you are doing the work of being human in a world that is still learning how to hold you. The doorsteps and fences are not gone. They have just changed shape. They are waiting for you to find them, to create them, to lean against them and invite someone else to stop and be present with you. They are waiting for you to slow down long enough to notice that the person in front of you is a person, not an obstacle or a transaction or a means to an end. They are waiting for you to give yourself permission to be seen fully, without apologizing for taking up time or space or attention. And when you find those moments, when you create them, when you let them happen, something old wakes up in you, something that remembers being held by a community, something that remembers having a place, something that recognizes in the eyes of another person who has stopped and is really looking at you, the reflection of your own mattering. And for a moment, just a moment, you are not lost. You are not alone. You are not invisible. You are here, and someone else is here with you. And that is enough. It has to be enough, because it is what you have, and because, if you are honest, it is a kind of miracle that in a world moving as fast as this one, in a world as fragmented and distracted and overwhelmed as this one, two people can still stop and see each other, can still lean against a fence, literal or metaphorical, and let time slow down enough for recognition to happen. That is not nothing. That is not a small thing. That is the thread that connects you to every human who has ever lived. The thread that says, we are social creatures and we need each other, and no amount of technological progress or cultural change will ever erase that need. So you hold on to the thread. You look for the doorsteps. You create the fences. You stop when you can. You let yourself be seen when it feels safe. You see others when they let you. And slowly, imperfectly, with many missteps and moments of disconnection, you build a life that has room in it for recognition. Not as much as you might want, not as deep or as constant as it once was for your ancestors, but enough. Enough to remind you that you are not alone. Enough to give you a place, however provisional, in the world. And maybe that is the work of this era. Not to recreate the past, but to salvage from it the things that matter, and to find ways to weave them into a present that looks nothing like what came before. To honor the hunger for recognition without letting it trap you in nostalgia. To build new forms of belonging that respect both the need for rootedness and the need for freedom. To create doorsteps and fences that work in a world that is always moving, always changing, always becoming something it has never been before. This is not easy work. It is the work of a lifetime, maybe many lifetimes. But it is your work, the work of being human in this particular moment in history. The work of holding the tension between what you need and what the world offers. The work of remembering that the ache you feel is not a sign that you are broken, but a sign that you are paying attention. That you are still connected to the deep old needs that make you human. That you have not yet been fully absorbed into the speed and efficiency and isolation of the modern world. And that, in itself, is something. That is a form of resistance. A way of saying, I will not disappear. I will not become invisible. I will not give up on the possibility of being seen, of having a place, of mattering. Even if the world is not designed to make it easy. Even if I have to build it myself, piece by piece, conversation by conversation, doorstep by doorstep, I will find a way. Because the alternative of living without recognition, of moving through the world unseen, is not living at all. It is just going through the motions. And you were not made for that. You were made to be seen, to see others, to weave yourself into the fabric of shared life. So you keep looking, you keep trying, you keep stopping even when it is inconvenient, even when you are busy, even when it would be easier to just keep moving. Because every time you stop, every time you let yourself be present to another person, you are enacting a small rebellion against the forces that want to turn you into a productivity unit, a consumer, a data point. You are insisting that you are a person, that you have a place, that you matter. And maybe that is all the doorstep was ever about. Not the physical structure, but the act of stopping, of being present, of giving another person the gift of your full attention, even if only for a few minutes, of saying, without words, you are here and I see you. And that is enough. That is everything. This is the legacy of the doorsteps and fences. Not the structures themselves, but the quality of attention they made possible. The willingness to pause. The capacity to be fully present. The generosity of recognition. These are not tied to any particular time or place. They are human capacities. They are always available, even in a world that makes them harder to access. They are waiting for you to claim them, to practice them, to offer them to the people around you. And when you do, something shifts, not just in you, but in the space between you and the other person. A doorstep appears where there was none before. A fence materializes, marking the boundary between your world and theirs, while also creating a place where the two worlds can meet. And for a moment, you are both held in that space, recognized, seen, known. And the loneliness recedes just a little, just enough to remind you that it is possible. That connection is still possible. That you are not as alone as you sometimes feel. This is not a solution. It is not a fix. It is not a way to make the modern world less lonely once and for all. It is just a reminder. A small, persistent reminder that the hunger you feel is not irrational. That the need for recognition is not weakness. That the doorsteps and fences were real and they mattered, and the part of you that mourns their loss is paying attention to something true. And maybe that is enough. Maybe the point is not to solve the problem, but to understand it, to name it, to stop pretending that you should be fine with a world that does not see you, to give yourself permission to want more, to need more, to look for more, and to find it, us in small moments, in unexpected places, in the brief pause when someone stops and looks at you and you look back, and for a second, just a second, you are both fully there. Those seconds add up. They do not erase the loneliness, but they punctuate it. They remind you what you are hungry for. They give you a taste of the thing itself, not the substitute, not the shadow, but the real thing. The actual experience of being recognized by another human who is not in a hurry, who has no agenda, who is just there with you in that moment, for no reason other than that you are both alive and both human and both deserving of each other's attention. And maybe, just maybe, if you collect enough of those moments, if you seek them out and create them and offer them to others, they start to build into something larger. Not a replacement for the old world, but a new kind of world. One that has room in it for both freedom and belonging, for both mobility and rootedness, for both efficiency and recognition. A world that understands that you need both, that you have always needed both, that the tension between them is not a problem to solve, but a paradox to hold. You are learning to hold it. You are learning to live in the space between what you need and what the world offers. You are learning to create your own doorsteps and fences, your own thresholds and boundaries, your own moments of stopping and being seen. And in that learning, you are becoming something new, not the person who lived in the old world of automatic recognition, and not the person the modern world wants you to be, efficient and isolated and self-sufficient, but something in between. As someone who remembers what it felt like to be seen and who is determined to find ways to make it happen again, even if it is harder now, even if it requires more intention, even if the world is not set up to support it. This is your work. This is your contribution to the ongoing project of being human. To remember what matters, to refuse to let it disappear, to insist that recognition is not a luxury, but a necessity. To create the conditions, however imperfectly, that make it possible, and to offer it generously and without expectation to the people around you who are just as hungry for it as you are. Because they are. They are all hungry, all lonely, all moving too fast, and wondering why they feel so untethered, all carrying the same ache that you carry, the same hunger to be seen, us the same longing for a doorstep or a fence or any kind of threshold where they can stop and be met by another person who is not in a hurry. They are all looking for the same thing you are looking for. And when you offer it to them, when you stop and see them, you are not just meeting your own need. You are meeting theirs. You are creating, in that moment, the kind of world you want to live in. And that is how it changes. Not all at once, not through some grand revolution or return to the past, but through small acts of recognition, through doorstep moments created one at a time, through the slow accumulation of instances where people stop and see each other and remember what it feels like to be human in the presence of another human. It is not dramatic, it is not fast, but it is real, and it is within your reach, every day, every moment. Every time you choose to stop instead of rushing past, every time you choose to see instead of looking through, every time you lean against the fence and invite someone else to do the same. This is the quiet revolution, the one that happens in living rooms and on sidewalks and in coffee shops and on porches, the one that says, I will not let the world make me invisible. I will not let speed replace presence. I will not let efficiency erase recognition. I will stop. I will see. I will be seen, and I will do it again and again and again until it becomes second nature, until it becomes the new normal, until the world starts to shift, one doorstep at a time, back towards something that feels like home. And now, as you sit with all of this, as you let the words settle into the spaces where the ache lives, that you might notice something shifting in you. Not a solution, not an answer, but a softening, a release of the pressure to fix it all, to have it all, to be everything the modern world demands, while also meeting every need the old world once satisfied. You cannot do both. You cannot be both. And that is okay. That is not failure. That is just the reality of living in a time of transition. You do what you can. You find the doorsteps where they still exist. You create them where they do not. You stop when it is possible. You see when you are able. You let yourself be seen when it feels safe. And when it is not possible, when the world is moving too fast and you are too tired and everyone around you is too distracted, you do not blame yourself. You do not add that weight to the load you are already carrying. You acknowledge the ache. Yet you name it. You understand where it comes from and why it is there. And then you let it be. You let it exist without needing to fix it. Because some aches are not meant to be fixed. Some hungers are not meant to be fully satisfied. They are meant to remind you of what matters, to keep you oriented toward the things that make you human, to prevent you from disappearing completely into the machinery of modern life. The ache for recognition is one of those hungers. It will probably always be with you, at least a little, because the world you live in will probably never fully meet that need in the way the old world did. And that is a loss, a real loss. But it is not the whole story, because you are also gaining things: freedom, choice, possibility. The ability to become someone you could not have been in a world where your place was fixed from birth. So you hold both: the loss and the gain, the ache and the freedom, the longing for the doorsteps and fences and the appreciation for the open road. You do not have to choose. You do not have to resolve the paradox. You just have to live in it, to let it shape you, to let it teach you what it means to be human in this particular moment in the long, strange story of your species. And maybe, as you sit with that, you feel the weight of it all starting to ease. Not because the problems have been solved, but because you have stopped demanding that they be solved. You have stopped insisting that life should be easier than it is, that you should be better at this than you are, that the world should offer you something it is not structured to provide. You have stopped fighting what is and started accepting it, not with resignation, but with a kind of grace, a willingness to work with the materials you have been given, even if they are not the materials you would have chosen. This is the beginning of rest. Not the rest of sleep, though that may come too, but the rest of acceptance, the rest of letting go, the rest of trusting that you are doing enough, even if it does not always feel like enough. That you are enough, even in a world that constantly tells you that you are not. That the moments of recognition you do find, however rare, however brief, are real, and they matter, and they are worth stopping for. So you let yourself stop. You let the rushing quiet down. You let the pressure to keep moving release its grip on your body. You imagine yourself leaning against a fence, metaphorical or real, and you let time slow down. You let the world recede a little. You let the noise and the speed and the demands fade into the background. And in the space that opens up, you notice something. Someone. Not a specific person, but the possibility of a person. The potential for a moment of recognition. For a doorstep conversation. For a pause that feels like coming home. You do not force it. You do not manufacture it. You just leave the door open. You make yourself available to the possibility. And that in itself is a kind of recognition. A recognition of your own need. A recognition that you are allowed to want this. That you are allowed to stop and wait and hope that someone else might stop too. That you do not have to keep moving all the time. That rest is not laziness. That presence is not inefficiency. That the slow, unhurried act of being seen is not a waste of time, but the point of being alive. And as you let yourself rest in that understanding, as you let your body settle into the knowledge that you are allowed to need what you need, you might feel something that has been clenched for a long time start to release. A tension you did not know you were holding. A fear you did not know was driving you. The fear that if you stop, you will be forgotten. That if you are not constantly proving your worth, you will become invisible. That recognition is something you have to earn over and over, rather than something you are entitled to simply by virtue of being human. But you are entitled to it. You always have been. You were born deserving recognition. You did not have to do anything to earn it. You did not have to achieve anything or produce anything or optimize anything. You just had to exist. And that was enough. That is still enough. Even if the world has forgotten, even if the people around you have forgotten, even if you have forgotten, it is still true. You matter. Your presence matters. The simple fact of your existence is worth noticing. And when you let yourself believe that, even just a little, even just for a moment, something shifts. The hunger does not disappear. The ache does not go away. But they become bearable, manageable. You stop expecting them to be satisfied all the time. You stop demanding that the world give you what it is not set up to provide. And instead, you start looking for the small moments, the brief pauses, or the unexpected doorsteps, and you start to see them everywhere. In the person who holds the door open and meets your eyes. In the stranger who smiles at you on the street. In the friend who asks how you are and waits for the real answer. In the barista who remembers your order. In the neighbor who waves. In the colleague who stops by your desk just to chat. These are not the deep, sustained recognition of the old world. They are not the fence-leaning conversations that lasted hours. But they are recognition nonetheless. They are small moments of being seen. And they add up. They accumulate. They remind you that you are not invisible, that you are still here, that you still matter. And maybe, if you pay attention to those moments, if you let them in instead of dismissing them as insignificant, you start to feel a little less alone, a little less untethered, a little less like you are moving through a world that does not see you, because the world does see you. Not all the time, not in the way you most need, but enough. Just enough to keep you going. Just enough to remind you that connection is still possible, that recognition is still real, that the doorsteps and fences are not entirely gone. They have just changed shape. And now, as you feel yourself settling, as the words wash over you like a tide going out, you let yourself imagine that you are sitting on a doorstep. Not a specific doorstep, just the idea of one, a threshold, a place between inside and outside, between private and public, between your world and the world beyond. You are sitting there, and you are not in a hurry. You are not waiting for anything. You are just there, present, available, open to whatever comes next. And someone walks by. Or maybe they live next door. Maybe they are a stranger. Maybe they are someone you have known for years. It does not matter. What matters is that they stop. They see you sitting there, and they stop. And they ask, in a way that is not rushed, in a way that suggests they are willing to stay for the answer, how you are. And you tell them. Not the polite version, not the surface version, but something real, something true. And they listen. They lean against the fence, or they sit beside you on the step, and they listen. And for a few minutes, or maybe longer, you are both there together. Fully present, fully engaged, fully human. And then the moment passes. They have to go. You have to go. Life resumes its pace. But something has changed. You have been seen. You have been recognized. And that recognition will stay with you. It will sustain you through the next stretch of time when you feel invisible. It will remind you that connection is possible, that you are not alone, that you have a place in the world, even if that place is temporary, even if it is provisional, even if it is not the stable, permanent place your ancestors had. It is still a place. It is still yours, and it is enough. So you let yourself rest in that. You let the image of the doorstep fade. You let the imagined conversation dissolve. And you are left with just yourself, sitting quietly, breathing slowly, feeling the weight of your body and the rhythm of your breath, and the knowledge that you are here. You exist. You matter. And somewhere, someone sees you. Maybe not right now. Maybe not in this exact moment. But somewhere. Someone. And that is enough to hold on to. The world is changing. It has always been changing. It will always be changing. And you are changing with it, learning to live in new ways, to find recognition in new forms, to create doorsteps where none exist, to be both free and connected, both mobile and rooted, both independent and seen. It is not easy. It will never be easy, but it is possible. And you are doing it. One moment at a time. One conversation at a time. One pause at a time. And now you can rest. Not because the work is done, but because you have done enough for today. You have acknowledged the ache. You have named the hunger. You have understood where it comes from and what it is asking of you. And now you can let it be. You can let yourself be. You can stop striving and stop seeking and stop demanding, and just be here, in this moment, us in this body, in this life that is yours. The doorsteps are still there, in memory and in metaphor, and sometimes in reality. The fences are still there, marking boundaries and creating spaces for connection. And you are still there, carrying the hunger for recognition that has been with your species for hundreds of thousands of years. You are part of an old story. And you are part of a new story, and you are doing the best you can to live in the space between them. And that is enough. You are enough. This moment is enough. The recognition you have found, however small, is enough. The recognition you will find tomorrow, or next week, or next year, is waiting for you. But for now, you can rest. You can let go. You can settle into the quiet knowledge that you are here. And you are seen, and you matter. The world is vast and fast and often overwhelming, but it is also full of doorsteps and fences and moments when people stop and see each other. They are harder to find now. They require more intention. but they are there, and you will find them. And when you do, you will stop, and you will be present, and you will offer and receive the recognition that makes you human. And until then, you rest, you breathe, you let the day end, you let the noise fade, you let yourself be held by the knowledge that you are not alone, that you have never been alone, that the hunger you feel is a hunger shared by every human who has ever lived, and that the doorsteps and fences, in whatever form they take, are waiting for you. Always waiting, always there, always ready to hold you when you are ready to stop and lean and be seen. So you close your eyes, or you let your gaze soften, and you feel yourself settling into rest. The kind of rest that comes not from solving problems, but from accepting them. Not from having all the answers, but from being willing to live with the questions. Not from being fully satisfied, but from being willing to be human, with all the ache and longing and need that comes with it. You are here. You are seen. You matter. And that is enough. For now. For tonight. For this moment. That is enough. The fire is burning down to embers. The light is fading. The warmth is still there. But it is gentler now. Quieter. The kind of warmth that lets you sleep. That lets you rest. That lets you trust that tomorrow will come, and with it, new doorsteps, new fences, new moments of recognition. But for now, you rest. You let go. You settle into the quiet, into the dark, into the soft, slow rhythm of your own breathing. And you know, somewhere deep and wordless, that you are held, that you have a place, that you are not alone. And that is where the story ends. Not with resolution, but with rest. Not with answers, but with acceptance. Not with the past restored, but with the present acknowledged. You are here, and that is enough. Rest now. The doorsteps will still be there tomorrow, and so will you.